Hey folks, a few weeks back we took a look at Farcry 5 CPU utilisation using a few Ryzen CPUs in a mid-range RX 580 8GB graphics card. From the lowly 4 threads on offer from the Ryzen 3 to the higher core count 16 threaded goodness offered up by the Ryzen 7, two things were abundantly clear in that test. Firstly, Farcry 5 in comparison to some other games generally used the CPU very well, with loads being pretty evenly distributed across all cores, even loading up all 16 threads when we moved up to the Ryzen 7. Secondly, and as a lot of you were right to point out, using a mid-range card like the RX 580 does mean that we were GPU bound in most scenarios, which was proven when even the difference between running the game on a 4-threaded Ryzen 3 returned pretty much exactly the same results as doing so with the Ryzen 7, give or take a couple of percent here and there. So for Farcry 5 with a budget Ryzen 3 CPU and an RX 580, it was a good match, pushing both components really hard, but what if we turned up the GPU a notch, or two? Say hello to the Palette GTX 1080 Game Rock, a bit of a behemoth of a card with a 2.5 slot cooler design, big fans and a big boost clock. Compared to the RX 580, this is very much a step up in the table. So can the little Ryzen 3 with its 4 cores and 4 threads keep this hungry beast fed? To try and eliminate as much variance as possible, I've locked the Ryzen 7 1700 and the Ryzen 3 1200 to 3.5 GHz across all cores, and the system is still using a generous helping of 24GB of DDR4 memory, clocking in at 3000 MHz. And testing both CPUs at 1080 ultra-wide resolution on ultra, normal and low presets should let us see if we really reach the limit of what little budget quad cores can do. First up, we're going to go with the Ultra preset and TAA turned on, and I'm expecting this to be the closest bench test. And sure enough, things were pretty close, with the Ryzen 3 CPU utilisation obviously being pretty much tapped out from the offset, with frequent spikes to 100% on all 4 threads, leading to a small dip in frames. The Ryzen 7 1700 on the other hand barely broke a sweat here, with a max CPU utilisation being kept below 50% at all times, and averaging out in the mid-30s. And there wasn't a huge difference in the test results here, with both setups averaging well over 60 FPS. Hopping down to the normal preset sees very little change to either setup's CPU utilisation. 4 threads tapped out on the 1200 and the 16-threaded 1700 taking everything in its stride. With this being a little bit less GPU bound here, the gap starts to open up a little. But it's still not a huge amount. But when we move down to the low preset, it's here that we see the Ryzen 3 CPU really struggle to feed the GTX 1080, with the averages being around 12 FPS lower when using the 1200 compared to the 1700. If we take a look at the deviations between the two CPUs as a percentage result, we can get a clearer picture of what's actually happening. On ultra settings, the bottleneck of the Ryzen 3 1200 is around about 5% or so, which is not too bad. On the normal settings, we see a percentage difference that average out about 7.5%, but this doubles to 15% when using the low preset. So what does this actually mean? Well, right here and now, to be honest with you, not a whole lot. I played through a good chunk of Farcry 5 again using the 1080 and 1200, and in all honesty the difference, while perceptible in really intense scenes, it was not game breaking or nightmarish. But looking forward, we can draw a few conclusions. Firstly, 4 threads, or preferably 4 physical cores, is where you should be aiming your sights if you need an entry-level CPU in 2018. As technology advances and GPUs get faster at a lower price point, remember the GTX 1060 came out boasting similar performance to the previous generation GTX 980, there will start to be a noticeable difference. And as games get more computationally heavy, that difference is going to be amplified. AMD has already stated that they're aiming to offer their 2019 Navi-based graphics cards at a mid-range price point, but with GTX 1080 performance. So we do know that the mid-range is going to get a lot more powerful in the next 18 months or so. And couple that with the rumours that the next generation of games consoles are going to be using higher core count and more powerful Ryzen-based CPUs, this is going to allow developers to create more elaborate worlds which will tax CPUs a lot more than the games currently can. But the second point is, if you're on a budget and only want to game at 1920 by 1080 at 60 FPS, then you probably shouldn't worry too much about your humble little quad core. Even when cranked up to ultra, and locking the game to 60 FPS, which is the refresh rate 99% of budget gamers' monitors are, gameplay was smooth as butter despite the high CPU utilisation. But I'll stop rambling. If you've got an older i5, a Ryzen 3, or even one of the new Core i3s, games like Far Cry 5, it's got to run silky smooth for the most part. But you are much better pairing it with something the level of an RX 480, an RX 580 or GTX 1060. If you've got something less powerful than those, then you're certainly not going to have any issues maxing out your GPU usage. But if you move up to anything higher, you are going to start to starve that GPU. So whether building a new system or upgrading an existing rig, just think about the build as a whole before you go pairing that slick new GTX 1080 or Vega graphics card with a lower end CPU to save costs. But I'm going to leave it there for today, folks. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all in the comment section down below and in the next video.